Hi, my name is Brian Lemoon, and I'm going to give you an overview of the CE audit of Uber. First question is why choose Uber? Uber, as you're well aware, is a very disruptive company right now. It's disruptive innovation. It's expanding massively. It's in the news quite consistently, and it really has, I think, a world-class entrepreneur as CEO. It's a private company, it's not public, so information's hard to get, particularly on the financial side. And we'll see as the slides progress a lot of information about this very interesting company. Uber was founded in 2009 by Garrett Camp and Travis Kalanick, and the service launched in San Francisco in June 2010. Initially, the vision that Camp had for Uber was a black car limousine service for himself and his friends. It wasn't envisaged initially as a taxi cab replacement service, and Travis Kalanick basically pushed back in terms of it being a very small idea. But over the following months, Camp was able to convince him that this could be a much bigger operation, and the rest is history. Uber currently is in over 60 countries, more than 500 cities. Its capital market value, if it were an IPO today, would be in excess of 60 billion, which is larger than Ford or General Motors. And it aims to provide the safest, reliable, and most cost-effective option for individuals to move across cities. Uber has two very interesting other businesses, which is Uber Rush, a kind of courier service, and Uber Eats, which is a meal delivery service. Uber claims to provide part-time employment for over 500,000 drivers globally, and in terms of the percentage of the US population that's used Uber, Pew Research have come back with a figure of about 15%. In the important 18 to 29 age groups, that figure is actually almost double at 28%, so that's pretty interesting. Its mission statement is transportation as reliable as running water everywhere for everyone. So Uber aims to be in every house in the world. A couple of points about Garrett. He's only 37 years of age. His net worth is in $5 billion range. His claim to fame is selling StumbleUpon, which is a software package which helps to personalize the web for an individual. He sold it at eBay for $75 million, and a few years later he actually bought the company back for $0, as eBay had basically lost a lot of the equity value of the company. Kalanick and Camp were at a convention in Paris, and they had problems getting a taxi, and that's where Camp came up with this significant idea in conjunction with Kalanick. Travis Kalanick is a very hard-driving CEO. He's had a rough time in terms of his earlier business experience prior to Uber. He dropped out of UCLA. He's a bit of a prodigy to start this startup company, ScoreNet. He secured funding from some wealthy investors, including Michael Ovitz, who became a mentor to him. Ovitz is the CEO of CAA and is a very hard-driving, take no prisoners type of CEO. So that is shown in Travis's modus operandi. Score was eventually sued by the music industry for over $250 billion and went into Chapter 11. For the next 6 years, Kalanick really focused in terms of rebuilding under a new company, Red Swoosh, to prove his critics wrong and to actually have a service which he could offer to the 33 core litigants that had sued him previously, to show them that he was kind of better than them. After 6 years of relentless work, with the company downsizing continuously, he ended up with himself and just one engineer in his parents' house. He was able to convince Mark Cuban to invest, and eventually he was able to secure a major client, which was the television satellite company EchoStar. And eventually they sold out to Acme for over 20 million in 2007, and he became an angel investor. If we use some of the aspects of leadership, key leadership from Burns. We see value creation through innovation and change, and certainly Uber fits that because of the disruption it brings to the transportation industry. Hands-on management, we see that Cabs and Hellenic are both involved in the business up to today. And freedom to grow and fail. Uber has entered several markets and in fact exited China recently, and these were billion-dollar bets. Definitely there is a lot of risk they've undertaken, but also they have succeeded much more than they have failed. Uber culture. This comes from some of the employees of Uber. It's an extraordinary team. Senior team members have experienced failure in the past, and managers and employees are incredibly skilled, incredibly talented. It's a flat meritocracy. There's a lot of options. There's high growth. You Skype for meetings, so often you don't or will never meet some of your co-workers. Very high stress level. They say it's a sprint with a marathon work hours, 80 to 100 hours a week. It's very disjointed. It's a big company with big company corporate values, etc., procedures, policies, but without the support that you would expect in a large company. That's part of what makes it different. I'd also like to talk at this stage about the competitive intensity using Porter's 5 forces analysis. And the highlight I'd like to focus on is the threat of new entrants. I was a bit taken aback and surprised by the analysis, and it became abundantly clear that Uber, it's an extremely good industry. For Uber, it's very bad for its competitors. So in terms of new entrants, the key element is attracting drivers to the service. The key element is attracting drivers to the service. Current promotions that both Uber and Lyft run are in the $750 range per driver. These are bonuses paid to get them to become new drivers, to shift from Lyft to Uber, or in Lyft's case, to shift from Uber to Lyft. So a new entrant would have to pay similar promotional expenditures to be able to attract the amount of drivers that, let's say, Uber has, and that would be around about $18 million of promotions required just in New York City alone. So it's very evident that that's a bit of a barrier to entry to any new startup that would like to be able to get into the ride-sharing business. So if you look at 10 major cities in the United States, you could be looking at close to 200 million just to be able to do promotions, to be able to have a foothold in the city with the drivers. It's basically an insurmountable barrier, so I don't expect Uber to face any competition in the United States over the medium term. There are similar issues for supplier power, buyer power, the threat of substitutes, industry rivalry. If we look at industry rivalry, Lyft is the main competitor to Uber. However, Lyft is in half the cities that Uber is in, and Lyft has just 1/3 of the cash available compared to Uber. So Lyft only has 1/3 of the cash available compared to Uber. In conclusion, the industry is very attractive for the incumbent firm, Uber. It's very unattractive for new entrants and Uber's current competitors. So Uber is in a very strong competitive situation, and in fact most experts expect the industry to become a duopoly between, in the United States, Uber and Lyft, and maybe long-term globally between Uber and Didi out of China. So you're talking about a market that will be highly profitable, that will be extremely large for these companies. If we were to look at Uber and Lyft's products, we see there's a bit of a gap. Lyft don't offer a super premium limo type service, and they don't offer a taxi service. Uber offers both, and this gives it a competitive advantage in some parts of the world where it cannot enter the cap market. And this gives it an advantage in parts of the world. And this gives it an advantage in parts of the world where Uber is unable to enter as a ride-sharing company. Uber is therefore able to get a footprint in the city by limousine service and possibly a taxi cab service, which will allow it to get its branding out there, become the dominant player over time, and prevent other entrants into the city. This graph of the New York City unique visitors, this graph of the New York City unique vehicles is quite interesting. It shows the growth of Uber. It surpassed in comparatively short time the licensed yellow cabs. And interestingly enough, the gap between Uber and Lyft is getting larger. That means that the number of vehicles dispatched, the number of paying passengers, is increasing more rapidly for Uber than it is for Lyft. Over time, that should mean that Uber will continue to have a bigger market share than Lyft. Lyft is not closing the gap. Let's take a little look at entrepreneurial intensity. As we all know, the level of entrepreneurial intensity is linked to a high level of corporate entrepreneurship. In the 17 areas that I graded Uber and Lyft, there were 2 areas I couldn't grade because I didn't have the internal information. But in the remaining areas, Uber outscores Lyft significantly. And therefore the conclusion is that within its industry, Uber has the highest level of entrepreneurial intensity, and by extension the highest level of corporate entrepreneurship. Based on Uber's highest level of entrepreneurial intensity, scoring relative to its industry, it's evident that Uber has by extension a high level of corporate entrepreneurship. So using entrepreneurial intensity scoring, we see it pointed to this high level of corporate entrepreneurship that Uber has. I also use the CE audit grid. This is Burns 2008, which has a scoring of 60 versus the 2013 model, which has a scoring of 100. It's quite interesting because leadership scores very highly at 56, which is what we kind of expected because of the famous CEO that Uber has, and the need to have this key spokesperson and key leader who's able to rally the troops and is able to surmount some of the regulatory issues and other country issues that come up as municipalities and even governments try to prevent Uber from expanding in their territories. In terms of strategy and culture, pretty high at 53 and 54 respectively. Structure is a lower score, and you intuitively expect that because Uber's been expanding so very fast that it leaves sometimes its structure behind. Its structure has not necessarily caught up, as we saw in the cultural grid with the rest of Uber. But still, versus its environment, it's ranks very highly, and the environmental score is 53. So in 3 of the areas we're ranking above the environment, and the max score is only at about 60. So the conclusion is that Uber has a high leadership and culture. So the conclusion is that Uber ranks highly in terms of corporate entrepreneurship. So the conclusion is that Uber ranks highly in terms of corporate entrepreneurship in those 3 key areas. Innovative intensity. As Burns notes, for long-term success, innovation is essential in organizations. Uber's product is disruptive innovation. It creates a new market and value system and displaces an existing market and existing market leaders. Many of these major cities serviced by Uber have seen traditional taxi cabs lose as much as 40% of their business over time. And Uber, by harnessing new technologies and providing a far superior product to the taxi cab industry, will continue to be able to maintain this and even grow to an even higher rate than 40%. This is a graph. This is a diagram of Uber's disruptive innovation. We see on the x-axis the frequency of innovation. On the y-axis we see the extent of innovation from incremental to radical. In Uber's case, it's radical and not too frequent. It's difficult to have a lot of radical, game-changing innovation on a very frequent basis. In terms of the products that this disruptive innovation is or represents, we have, so in terms of this disruptive innovation, we have three main products. UberX, which is the on-demand taxi cab service. We have Uber Eats, which is meal delivery, and we have Uber Rush, a courier service for important documents or time-sensitive information that needs to be couriered or transported within a city. I'd like to also at this stage talk about some of the risks that Uber faces, both from its innovation and also from its external and internal environment. There are legal challenges to Uber's business model. Currently, its drivers are what are called 1099 contractors, in that they are contractors and not Uber employees. There are several court cases. Uber settled two key cases recently, particularly one in California. If Uber in the future loses a major case in terms of drivers or municipalities trying to get the drivers to be employees and not contractors, then its cost structure changes fundamentally. Its benefit and other costs will go up, and its liabilities for insurance and other liabilities will dramatically increase. So that is a direct challenge to Uber's future. There's a risk of key cities or even federal legislation regulating Uber's activities. Things like background checks, onerous insurance, onerous training, high age requirements, all things that reduce the driver pool and therefore Uber's ability to service customers. There's a risk of Uber losing sight of the business it's in. There's a risk of Uber losing sight of the business it's in. What business is Uber in? It's in the transportation business. But Uber doesn't seem to have taken seriously the cargo ride-sharing business, which I'll discuss afterwards. There's the risk that Lyft continues to compete, resulting in Uber's business being only break-even instead of making much better profits. And on recommendations, I have a slide to address that. The availability of driverless cars could fundamentally change the business dynamics. It could lead to the entrance of a new competitor, because as we saw previously, drivers are so very important to the ability of a company to compete in this area. So driverless cars will allow a well-financed company to suddenly get into the business without having to pay a lot of promotions to drivers. So possibly could a car company, car manufacturer, disrupt Uber's business in the years to come. There was a lot of dramatic news on August the 1st. There was a lot of dramatic news on August the 1st when Uber announced that it was withdrawing from China. The announcement was that the Uber business was to be sold to Didi, which is its main competitor in China. Uber has apparently about a 10 to 11% market share. Didi has about a 70%, possibly 80% market share in China. And Uber was losing over $1 billion a year in the Chinese market and fighting a ferocious fight against Didi. Uber will have about 17.7% of the combined company, and Didi will make a $1 billion investment in Uber. It's, in my viewpoint, it's a great deal for Uber. Uber doesn't have to lose $1 to $2 billion for the next 3 or 4 years and end up probably, or would have been in the same situation with $7 billion worse off. It buys Uber more time because Uber now can rapidly turn its attention elsewhere without having to be bogged down in this huge war in its number 2 market. Uber could possibly look at intensifying the competition against Lyft and entering other markets, perhaps in Africa, the Middle East, and certain other countries. Experts think it could create a duopoly where you have a global duopoly of Uber and Didi. They probably would start working much more closely together, and you could end up in this multi-billion-dollar revenue business with just two main suppliers, which is a dream for any capitalist. Recommendations. So in summary conclusion, so in summary and in conclusion, we've analyzed Uber and come to the conclusion that Uber shows a high level of corporate entrepreneurship. There are, however, some recommendations I'd like to make which come from the analysis of Uber. Uber needs to resolve the Lyft rivalry as soon as possible. It's costing Uber billions of dollars each year, and it's delaying the IPO launch of Uber. Uber right now is estimated to be a $65 billion company. The buyout of Lyft would take $7 to maybe $10 billion in cost. That means that the Lyft shareholders could possibly get 15% or less of a revised, large merged corporation. But on the bottom line, instead of the hundreds of millions that both companies are paying for these driver bonuses and other costs, there would be a much more reduced and efficient bottom line. Uber needs to launch a Uber Cargo service. The industry is huge. It's over 10 billion tons of cargo per year that are trucked in the United States alone, and over 120 billion in revenue. If Uber were to get just 10% of this market, that's a good $10 billion top line. And typically Uber would charge a 20% fee, so if that were reduced to 10%, we could be talking about $1 billion in net profit per year. Uber needs also to accelerate its other opportunities. It has vehicle financing and rental opportunities. Uber rents cars to its drivers, it sells cars to its drivers, provides the financing through both Toyota and Hyundai. In some Chicago Toyota dealerships, Uber is already 50% of their sales. With 500,000 drivers around the world, Uber has a built-in reservoir of car users. If cars are basically renewed every 5 years, that's potentially 100,000 cars per year in potential sales. That would be higher than the amount of cars that some car companies are selling in the United States. The Uber Eats business is potentially a huge business. This is for meal deliveries in city areas. So the concept would change from an employee leaving a business at lunchtime, standing in a line, and then coming back and eating lunch or eating lunch out and spending possibly 20-30 minutes of wait and travel time. If the meal instead is delivered to the employee, there's no need for a cafeteria, a canteen. Possibly there's no need to have a subsidized meal option within the office for employees. Instead, meals can be delivered by Uber within 10 to 20 minutes from a designated restaurant, and it's a real game changer. There are already UK corporations which are already in startup and attracting funding up to the $100 million range. So it's definitely a area where Uber is already operating, and you can see some acceleration in this area because they have a lot more job postings for Uber Eats managers in different cities. The last slide is on learnings. One of the learnings, what have I learned? What I've learned is that Travis Kalanick is already a legendary entrepreneur, having taken Uber in less than 6 years to evaluation, which is in excess of Ford or General Motors, both in existence for over 100 years. I think that I've learned somewhat from his, from what I've read and from his videos, and I think further I will be looking at what he's doing over the next couple of years and what I can learn from his management style and his approach to business, which is pretty out of the box. Uber has the potential to ignite the greatest disruption to the workforce since industrialization, because we're talking about gig sharing, which is part-time work, freelancing, and the on-demand economy and sharing economy. The on-demand economy being getting a product when you want it, in the form you want it, and the sharing economy being the utilization of resources that exist right now which are underutilized. For instance, the cars that are being used by these contractors that are driving for Uber. The question that's coming up in a lot of politicians' minds is, and economists' minds, is, are we moving to a period of less guaranteed full-time employment, and will the norm be that people will have part-time jobs and maybe have a main job and a secondary job? So these are important issues and questions moving forward in terms of the labor pool and the labor economy. It's quite evident also that US corporations are finding it very difficult to penetrate into the Chinese market. It's probably, to Travis's it's going to be seen as being a great decision, and that was made by Travis, to cut his losses and not spend years trying to penetrate a market which has been almost impossible for US corporations to benefit from or penetrate. So the question could be, in terms of out-of-the-box thinking, did he really think so far ahead that he probably concluded that it would have been nigh on impossible to dominate the China market, but if a corporation, Uber China, could be set up to push the local rideshare industry to absorb Uber China and give it a significant share of the Chinese market in perpetuity. That level of thinking is so far advanced it borders on the realm of being speculation. But it wouldn't surprise me in the years to come that we do find out that that was the real intention of Uber China being set up 3 or 4 years ago, that he saw this end game several years ago. It is also evident an unrelenting focus and desire to succeed can bring success. Against the most massive odds, Travis Kalanick was able to surmount the 6-year obstacle of proving his critics wrong and forming a profitable company. So in conclusion, I've learned a lot from this exercise. So I'd like to thank you all for staying to the end of the presentation, and I look forward to reviewing some of your presentations. Thank you.